One of the most interesting things about tech, at least in Jonathan's worldview, is that it's not just about code, it's about people. And today on the stream, Jonathan is joining us. He's a technical consultant who knows how to build teams that win. He has certifications at Google, Microsoft, and he's mastered the art of aligning his professional goals with his personal aspirations. Fractional CTO at and consultant, he's led multiple projects that boost collaboration and client satisfaction. He also has a passion project that I really got excited about, and that's the reason why I wanted to chat with him today. So I'm hoping that we can break all of that down on the stream.
Mhm.
Welcome to the stream, Jonathan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this conversation.
So, one of the things that we share in common as our passion is technology and seeing, people who come from our background win in tech. But if we take it all the way back to the beginning, why did you even get interested in technology in the first place?
Okay, so my interest in tech started when I was 8 years old. My aunt, who I have to give, credit to, Fatima, her name is Fatima. She had given me access to a computer, and I was into games at 8 years old. Like all 8 year olds, we're into GI Joes, Transformers, and games. I'm over here telling my age. But I say all that to say I was interested in playing this game, and she handed me this book, and you said you had to code it. So I, jumped in there. It was zeros and ones, and it was like I think like 10 pages long. And it's just a bunch of zeros and ones over and over and over again. And I sat there on the computer typing it in. I learned how to create a compiler to check my code through that process, and I was able to get the game working, and I played the game. But that whole journey of having to learn how to build it, save it, piqued my interest at that young age. As I got older, of course, I got involved in other things, but tech was always in the background. And it wasn't until I got to college where I took my tech passions full, all the way forward. I like to share that I had a professor at the college that I attended. I was one of three African Americans in the computer science program. And I remember my freshman year, the day, my second class, she asked me, "What are you doing here? Like, why? Like, why are you here? Like, you're not gonna finish." And I don't know what that did to me, but that triggered something in my mind, and I wanted to prove her wrong so bad that I pushed through and excelled in that class, and then of course, the rest is history.
So it's so fascinating, how adversity, oftentimes in
Mhm.
the moment is necessary, is often viewed as, something negative. But it's
Mhm.
also interesting how it can have such a positive impact, like it did in your case. How would you say, especially because this is like a two-way conversation in my mind, right?
Mhm.
Typically, when I'm talking to people, I'm usually talking through the lens of their own careers. But as someone who's also in the process of molding other people's careers,
Mhm.
I definitely want to get your insight into how adversity plays into helping people, reach their next goals, or how they can harness the power of that.
Sure. So I'll speak, from my perspective. My parents are of Haitian descent. They were immigrants who migrated to the United States, and I have five other brothers, so six of us. And my parents weren't rich. One of the things that I would say that technology did for me is, case in point with my family, I had family members who were well off, and being able to see them live their lives sort of pushed me to want to strive for that as well. Going through the hardships of, especially when I was in college, not having money to be able to afford to buy my computer. I spent the entire school year, the first year, my freshman year, scrapping for money to get my own computer because the computer lab closed at 8 o'clock and I had work to get done.
Mm,
I had to push through times where I was working full time and going to school full time and not even and hardly sleeping, right? And
mm,
like getting 3, 4 hours of sleep, waking up and doing the same thing all over again. And I did that for a good 3 years. The first 3 years of college, I went through that process. And there were many times through the process I wanted to quit. And there were many times friends of mine were like, John, why are you so adamant about that? But one of the things I did was I drew what I wanted the end to be.
mm,
And whenever I got to a point where I wanted to quit, I would look at that piece of paper to see what I wrote my end to be. And when I looked at that piece of paper, that visual pushed me to keep going. And so on that piece of paper, I had like, I wanted to have my own house, I wanted to have a car. And I would, there were times where I had bought the computer on, it was like a loan per month I
mm,
had to pay. And I'll never forget, it was Christmas and I wanted to buy myself a nice gift because I felt I worked hard, but I had to make that payment for the computer. And I didn't want to ruin my credit because, back then in college, every credit card company was giving you credit and I didn't want to damage my credit. So I forfeited giving myself a gift to make sure that I can pay. And I didn't have, and my parents, one of the things about having immigrant parents is they teach you how to be an adult very quickly. So when I turned 18, my conversation with my dad is, you're grown, you're a man, find your way. And I didn't
mm,
have at that age. I was about 20 at the time when I was trying to get my own personal computer. Besides the ones that family may have bought in the house that I use or what I use at the school library, but I didn't have the guts to ask my dad to help me pay for it.
mm,
I just remembered he said, "You're a man, so figure it out." And so I begged my managers to give me overtime, even though I knew it would affect my sleep, just so I can make enough to be able to pay off this computer. And also, I had a
mm.
car that I had to pay off too. So, so
Wow.
those struggles, um, for me, it what pushed me through the struggles was the visual of what I wanted the end to be. And whenever, I wanted to quit or I wanted to just say, forget this, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired or agitated at family or friends. I would look at that piece of paper and look at what I want my end to be. And I would it would help me push through.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You touch on so many themes that I think are very important, right? Like the aspect of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
delayed gratification. You talk about even having a model by your parents that helps you kind of like figure out, but also even having a roadmap. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think my next question is one of the things that I see that's lacking, oftentimes for a lot of people is having that North Star, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you navigate towards? You know, and I know like anybody who watches this has probably heard me make this analogy so many times. So pardon me one more time. It's around, how many black kids are playing to be in the NBA or in the NFL or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But when you actually look at the numbers of people who succeed, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
How that many people are fighting for those little positions. But it still goes down to that one thing, having a North Star, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all have that one thing that they're fighting towards. In your case, it wasn't that clear. You'd seen success. You kind of like figured this was a path to success, but it wasn't like you had actually had an actual picture and you kind of
Correct.
like had to drive that. Is there a way to, what were some of the things that helped you connect all those dots? Because it wasn't a clear picture. You had to add one
Mm-hmm.
plus one plus one to get there.
Right. I think, looking back at those years, my college years, and even my years right after college when I was getting into my career, I think what helped me was being exposed to people who had some of the things that I wanted. Um, one philosophy that I've always had is, in order to, and this is something that I learned at a young age, in order to be rich, you need to be around people who are rich. Okay. And
Hmm.
and 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 and, and see what they do. Like for me, one of the advantages I had was in Queens, where my grandmother lived. Her house was the first home. Every summer we would spend time at my grandmother's house. But
Hmm.
her neighbor was a Jewish man, and his son, we used to play basketball with his son, you know, at my grandparents' house because they were next door neighbors, and my grandparents had a basketball hoop, so we would always play basketball together. But the one thing that helped me was every time at like 5 p.m. he would go home. And then one day his father came out, and I asked his father, "What do you do?" And he told me he was a banker, right? He was the branch manager at Citibank. Not only was he the branch manager at Citibank, he owned the building that was next to my grandmother. And for some reason that piqued my interest because no one else around me had that, level of wealth. And so I would, from time to time, whenever I would see him outside, I would ask him questions, and he would give me advice. And he would like tell me, he was one of the first people who told me how to invest in stock, right? And so I got those tidbits from him. And then when I would go share it with my friends are who have the same predicament as me, they'd be like, "What are you talking about, John? We don't understand this." And so I would always go back, and I
To get
and
more
the
questions.
yeah, to ask more
You
questions.
know.
And so I would say one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me was, he told me one time to, whatever I want, write it down on paper and write it clearly, right?
Hmm.
And when you write it, and right now we have phones, we have devices, but there's something about going back to paper and pencil that is
Hmm.
just so powerful than by just putting a
Hmm.
note in your phone, right?
Hmm.
One of the things he told me was, whatever you want in life, write it down and be explicit about what you want and how you want to achieve it. And I
Hmm.
remember when, my friend, seeing his father have wealth. And then I remember one time I had the opportunity to go with them to the bank where his father worked. And I got
Hmm.
to see how everybody was like, "Yes, Mister," like everyone is like, he walks in, everybody is like still. And just being able to see that, like, wait, this man
Hmm.
runs this bank. Those are his
Hmm.
employees.
Hmm.
And I remember when back then, you see people with flashy cars and flashy things, and being young, you may be enticed to go, for those things. But a, a lot of my success in life came from me writing it down and being very direct in terms of how I wanted to get things. And I feel
Hmm.
that, being exposed to my grandparents' neighbor helped me, because he then introduced me to other people, and I got to ask questions, and they were willing to help me. A lot of times when we're around the same people as us, we sometimes need to
Yeah.
separate ourselves and just be in the room of someone who is at the place of where we're trying to be, or close to the place where we're trying to
Hmm.
be, and just
Hmm.
hearing from them, like, their story. Like he would share stories of how he got into the industry, how one lesson he taught me, which I stick to this day, is you don't always have to follow everybody else.
Hmm.
Like, your journey is your journey, and it may not be the
Hmm.
same as everybody else. But as long as you've written it down on paper and
Hmm.
written down distinct steps, you may not achieve all those steps, right? But what you want to do is always go back and look at the steps that you wrote down And if it needs to be broken down even further, break it down even further. But that's a philosophy that I've used over the years, and it has helped me in my career be successful. And it's not to say that
Hmm.
you're not going to have roadblocks or hardships on the way. That's normal. But as long as you're able to distinctly write it out and write your goals out, and when your eyes see it and you see it every single day, on the days when you don't feel like doing it, but you look at it, it does wonders for you. It's really helpful.
Hmm. And that is so powerful. And when you say that, you unlock. Oh, first of all, I got to shout out William. Shout out William. Salute to you as well.
Oh, we live.
And
We live.
we're live. Yeah, and it says I agree. Be around people who are where you want to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's actually gonna be a segue to my next question because you
Hmm.
touched on something that I think is really, really important. First of all, you see, I was kind of like counting off all of those things that you're talking about, as models that helped you. And one of the things that I've realized is that, while success in different places, whether it's sports, tech, finance, wherever place, personal goals, professional goals, while those may look different in terms of like how to get there, I think oftentimes the recipe is kind of like the same exact thing,
Hmm.
right? Or at least those models carry over from industry to industry, space to space. And you touch on some of those things. For example, having a role model, right? That's very key. Having a set goal. You know, the very first time I had this thing about writing things down was maybe like, it was maybe even longer than 12 years ago. It was a pastor
Hmm.
who was saying it about how powerful it is. And he even broke it down to be something that's not even necessarily spiritual, right? Like, but there's a way that having things in a concrete way shapes your mind. And I've
Hmm.
heard it in terms of like, as rational beings, as human beings, we have this ability to always, shift the goalpost, right? So, for example, you wanted to do 10 things, but you're only able to do two. There's a way you can negotiate with yourself and say, two isn't bad. But
Hmm.
if it was written somewhere that says, my goal is 10, you can never really like talk yourself, even if you try to do it, it doesn't work as
Right.
easily, right? So I think that's something that I found so fascinating. But kind of like back to this idea. So those habits, those things that you were able to do, of course, you had those external influences that helped you. But how does one start to build them up, right? For example, even focusing on your own goals. I remember reading one book, Psychology of Money, right, and talks
Hmm.
about how the reason many people, greed takes over and like they're investing in things they really shouldn't be and doing all of this, interesting stuff that may lead to their financial ruin is because we can easily get distracted and pulled into other people's goals. So
Hmm.
instead of like, and if you looked at where you wanted to be 10 years ago, you would have been so excited that you made this progress. But now that you're here, you're so focused on the guy who's, driving in Bentleys or whatnot that you forget like this was what you prayed for. So in
Hmm.
your case, like how did you bring all of this models together to help you to drive you to all the things that you've been able to accomplish?
So I had to develop some level of discipline. And so that was something I learned through talking to my mentor, about building strong habits, right? And so one thing that I did, as you know, as I matured and got older, especially through college, I always go back to college because college was the time frame where I think I fully mastered the process, right? Prior to college, I did things. I got excited when people praised me, and then there were other times where I did things and I didn't get praised and I just gave up. But I had to develop some discipline. And so what I did was I would start off with very small goals, right? So when I was learning the program COBOL, right? So that's dating myself. COBOL. COBOL was a complicated language, but what I did was I said, "Okay, John, you're working full time, you're going to school full time, you have family. My dad was is an evangelist. So there's church requirements that we have to go do. So we're balancing church and I'm of Haitian descent, so we say l'église. So we have to leverage l'église. I gotta leverage school. I gotta leverage work, and I gotta leverage family time. And so I started off with this goal where I was like, you know what? There's no way I can learn this language in 3 weeks.
mm,
But I know for the next 12 weeks, I can learn it. Well, how many hours do I want to dedicate per day? And I started the goal Monday through Friday, weekends off. I'm giving my mind to rest on the weekends. And I'm going to start off with an hour a day.
mm,
And once I got past the first day, I put on my board a check mark. So that check mark was a reinforcement because I had to pull into my, you know, I'm very competitive. So I needed to see check marks. So what I did was, this is funny. I put myself against a fictional character, right? So I'm looking. So what I did for the fictional character was I just put a bunch of check marks. And I put a finish date, and then I sort of subconsciously tricked myself. So, commit
you can't let
an
him
hour
win.
a day. I can't let this fake person win. And I'm telling you, Juan, literally about 3 weeks into doing it consistently, I found that, wait a second, I have more time. So then I bumped it up to an hour 15 minutes. And then it got to the point where I was doing 3 hours and doing it 4 days. And I got so good at the application because every milestone I passed and I looked at the other check mark, I'm like, oh, I got more check marks. And then I would go add more check marks for them to like put them ahead of me to trick myself to saying, okay, I gotta beat this fake this fake John over here. I gotta beat him. And so I did that for 4 months. I'm telling you, when I was done, I knew that application so good that for my class project, the teacher who told me, what are you doing in this class, gave me an A because she was so impressed on how not only how I wrote out my application, but how clean the code was. She was like, wow, like for someone who just learned this year, your coding was impressive. Like,
Hmm,
and, and I told her it was because I started off with a goal, and then as I gained confidence, I increased the goal incrementally. A lot of times what
hmm,
people do is people will start with a goal and they start off fine,
hmm,
but then they increase the goal to something that they're not truly committed to, and then they
hmm,
fall off. They fall off. And I can tell you
hmm,
in that class, her name was Professor Chang, and she was known on campus for failing students because her class was hard. And so she was the professor who who they said, once you get through her class, you're going to end up changing your major because she's going to break you down.
hmm,
And for me, I had to develop some habits where I was like, I'm going to I'm going to be good at this, and not only will I be good at it, I want to be the best at it. And
hmm,
because I had that competitive nature at a young age, I was very competitive. That pushed me to create very disciplined habits, which then helped me achieve my goal. And so, I, I wasn't upset. It took me 4 months to learn, but once I learned it, I was the best at it. And people were
hmm.
coming to me to help them get what they need done. So that's something that I feel, um, is great. building, you got to have discipline. You got to create some level of discipline within yourself. And again, the advice is start small, start with something small. And once, the word is, after 30 days, it becomes a habit.
Mm,
If you do something consistently every single day, it becomes habitual normally after 30 days. You have to
mm.
play, a lot of times in life, we got to play these mind games. We got to convince our mind that, yes, we need to do this. Yes, we need to do this because of what the end goal is going to be. And so building those habits early and making achievable goals that I could then increase over time truly, truly helped me in my career.
That is amazing. And first of all, let me shout out Kay. What up, Kay? Welcome to the stream. I hope you're enjoying all of the amazing content and gems that John is dropping. Um, you said something, and I want to kind of like play it back because that was so good. Like it resonates in an amazing way. One, first of all, understanding yourself. I think that one of the things that people underestimate the role that they play in their own
Mm-hmm.
success or even in their own failures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can lie to everybody, but you can never lie to yourself.
Right.
So you understand where your motivation comes from. And I don't think that even you sharing that only applies to you. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, one of the things, so there are people who are like very driven, there are people who are not, there are people who are some way, there are people who are not. I think the people who most of the time will most likely be successful are people who can internally motivate. And
Right.
that's so tough. Like people who just have that extreme drive regardless of the outcome, because we're social beings. Like we like to be successful, we like to, we don't like to not be successful, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why like not getting praise or failures or things like that. But it was interesting to see the model that you built around that, and also setting small achievable goals. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another one that where a lot of people trip up, because in fact, that's the reason why, working in tech exists, because, there's so many great content out there, right? That's inspiring people. You can start 90K, 90-day cybersecurity. You see all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? Just designed to get people excited. But the journey is never that easy. Like, think
Mm-hmm.
about learning just one skill for 4 months, right? And you were in college. So you were going to class, like you were active, but you still had to do your own personal development. And
Mm-hmm.
all of that wrapped up to build this career that you have today. That is the kind of context that's often lacking. So somebody tries to do something for 90 days because, somebody said you could do it. And now if you can do it, all of a sudden you want to quit. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
not your fault because you never had any additional context as to why, that 90 days works or doesn't. But going to your first role in tech, so you navigated this whole journey, you learned
Mm-hmm.
everything, you know, then you get to Apple. First of all, how did that happen, and how,
Mm.
and what was the kind of like impact that had on you?
Okay, so I got to give you a little backstory on how I got there. So there's a story to that story. So my journey to Apple happened like this. So I was working in retail, and I was in sales. So I worked for Guess. If everyone knows Guess, the clothing company, I was working for them. I was the number one salesperson in the Eastern region.
Wow.
There was nobody in the East that sold more clothes and shoes than me. And that was my full time job, and I was making really, really good money. Okay, and going to school full time. And when Guess came out with their commission package, oh man, I was making extra money. So I was living good. Now, what happened was my aunt, the same aunt who introduced me to computers when I was 8, she had moved. She moved from New York to Florida, and she was then moving to Georgia. She invited me. She said, "Nephew, just come visit." And I didn't really want to visit. Really, I was like, Georgia. I was like, these people slow. Nah, I don't want to come to Georgia. Nah. I'm a northern guy, Jersey, New York, that's where I saw myself for life. And I visited Georgia, and I fell in love with it. And then I came back and I gave my notice to the company, and they were shocked. They were like, okay, if you're going to move, at least stay with us, because the goal was they were going to at some point promote me to go to California, to the headquarters, and work in the corporate office for the company. And I got there. I didn't want any of that. And I was looking for a job, couldn't find a job in Georgia for about 6 weeks. And then I ended up working for for an agency. I was working for an agency, and I'm like, I got a tech degree. Why am I not working in tech? And then I found a company, CompUSA, and they had computer sales. So then I started off with computer sales. And while I was at CompUSA, I met the Apple rep, and me and the Apple rep had a great conversation. They were like, you should apply to work for us. And so I did. So I applied to work for Apple, and then the Apple retail stores had just hit Georgia. I think Georgia was the number 6, because we were R006. We were the 6th Apple store. And so I applied there as well. Fast forward, I got the job to work at the Apple store. So I was doing retail sales. Corporate wanted me, but then corporate said, well, being that you work for Apple retail, see you later. Fast forward 2 years in my career, I ended up going to work for Apple corporate. And I was working for Apple. I was excited. I had some power. I had some say in how things were going. And I did that for a while until they dissolved my division. And then I ended up going back to Apple retail. So I
Hmm.
worked at Apple almost 10 years. I think I was 8 months short of working at Apple, but it was a great experience. I learned a lot from what I learned from Apple. The biggest thing that I say about Apple that I learned the most of is how to deal with people, and
Hmm.
how to give people, and how to not only work with people, but how to understand people from whatever walk of life they're coming from, how to be able to navigate working with people. And so Apple is a very people focused organization, and that was one of the things that it taught me, because a lot of the principles that I learned in Apple, when I left Apple and then got into healthcare technology, which is what I spent a good chunk of my career in, a lot of the principles of how you work with people applied in those different roles. So, the story of Apple was, I got Apple from working at CompUSA, speaking to the Apple rep, who said, man, you have a computer degree, you should be working for us. And then that sort of spearheaded my career into technology.
That is such a cool story, and it
Mm-hmm.
reinforces something that a few people have said. We've also had someone else who's been in Apple retail to actually go to Apple corporate,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was Kelsey who said it. Like, if there's a company you really want to work for and you're transitioning into tech, actually working for that company in maybe not a tech role could actually be a gateway. So
Mm-hmm.
you're another like testimony to that.
Yep.
Uh, Quick shout out to William again. We're gonna win in the end. Amen. We're gonna win in the end. And then I think it's just reinforcing what you said. Sometimes you need something that's not cut out. Sometimes you need something that's not cut out for you. Not everything in your journey is going to be straightforward, but you keep going towards your goals. Absolutely. And it's so funny. Like I was just saying that it completely reinforces it. For most people I talk to in their tech careers, like one of the things that almost like comes together is like the journey makes sense in the end, but it doesn't always line up the way it's supposed to line up, right? But when you get there, it's so funny, like how you were talking about CompUSA taking, first of all, Gap taking you there, because I would imagine that being such a great salesperson at Gap played a
Mm-hmm.
role when you got to Apple, right? And it's funny, like, game recognized game. I think Apple is one of those companies that they're always looking for great people. And I'm sure, like, in that conversation, that must have really come through well to where the guy's like, you know what? You should be working for us, right? And I
Yep.
guess it
Yeah.
worked out.
It did. It did. It did. Yes.
So, when you then left Apple, you went to work at MailChimp. What was that experience like?
Well, actually, not Mailchimp. Actually, directly, I ended up working at a company called Ingenious Med. So I
Hmm,
worked at Ingenious Med. So that was healthcare IT. I worked there for about 4 years. Worked at another company, and then worked at another company called Electa, then Revel, and then I ended up at Mailchimp. And so
gotcha.
Mailchimp came about after COVID. So now,
Hmm,
my career in tech, I after Apple, I had to take a step back. So when I left
gotcha.
Apple and got into healthcare IT, I felt that I could jump into a high paying IT role, and it wasn't like that because they were like, but you're retail trying to transition. I'm like, but I have a degree in tech. I'm not using it to its full potential. I want to use it. And
Hmm,
so I started, I went back to go forward, right? So I
hmm,
took a step back, and then within a year, because they saw how good I was, I made it to where I needed to go from that point.
hmm,
But when
hmm,
working at Mailchimp, so Mailchimp came about actually at a low point in my life. Okay,
hmm,
what happened was COVID happened. I was coming back from a family trip, and this entire time I controlled my career. Every job that I got, I left the company and went to another company. And what happened was I ended up um, being on a call with my manager, and my manager crying. And when I saw my manager crying, I was like, this is not a good call. This is not a good call. And so I'm looking at her, and she's not talking to me. She's reading something, and she has tears in her eyes. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm about to lose my job. And of course, after the conversation, I was told that they were letting me go. They were letting go at the time 30% of the workforce. I was part of the first cut. And I had to take a step back. So I was like, my entire career was up, 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 up. I'm making good money. I'm traveling. I'm seeing the world. And now, for the first time, I'm going to have nothing.
hmm,
And so I took a month off, because one thing about being in tech that I learned, and I said this earlier, I learned how to manage my money well. Okay, so I have a philosophy, and this is a tip from John. Whatever your salary is, you spend 50%, you you save 30%, you play with 20%.
hmm,
Okay, 50% you say 50% you pay your bills, house, whatever you got to pay, car note. 30% is save. You save it. You don't spend it. 20% you play. You play, okay? So at the time, you know, I had a certain lifestyle because when you're making money, good money for a while, you have a lifestyle. You don't want that lifestyle to change. So I said, okay, how long can I do this? And I said, oh, I can do this for a good year and a half. But I said, you know what? I'm not going to take a year and a half. I'm going to take just a month. So I sat down, I meditated, I prayed to God, woe is me, what happened, how I got laid off. I'm valuable to this company, what is going on? And then I said, but I have a good network. I've met
hmm,
people, I've connected with so many people. Let me lean on my network. And I found out that some of the people, this goes back to Apple, some of the people who worked at Apple with me were working at MailChimp.
hmm.
So I reached out to some of them and said, hey, I'm here at MailChimp. John, oh my goodness, blah, blah. And then I found a role. I applied. And then I interviewed, everyone loved me, and I ended up being at MailChimp, and I spent a good year and a half there. It was a great experience. Made a lot of, great friends, worked on a lot of cool projects there. One of my, if I would rank my favorite places to work, MailChimp was definitely up there with Apple as one of the, great places to work. And that's how I ended up there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So in that answer, you brought a couple of things together, and it's so
Hmm.
fascinating. Listening to you. So I'm one. Maybe I should kind of like share this, and it's actually one of my new videos I'm going to be dropping. I'm very big on books, right? I love reading like,
Hmm.
books. I just referenced like Psychology of Money, Atomic Habits. I think you said something about building positive habits. You
Hmm.
also talk about like this 50-30-20 model. And it's so interesting because like, of course, working in tech, one of the things that it affords you is like this ability to be able to earn a high income. But, you know, if you make a lot of money but you spend a lot of money or you lose a lot of money, then it doesn't do anything, right? You have to make the
Hmm.
money and then you have to make the money stick, right? So it's
Yeah.
also great that that's a lens that you're bringing in, and I think that's a very interesting perspective. So back to the piece about you taking a step back. I saw that you went and got your MBA in healthcare, and I that was a
Hmm.
little that threw me off a little bit. So tell me, was that part of that transition? Was that part of that switch?
That was, yes. So it had a part in it because I got my degree in computer information systems, and the thing about me is a lot of my family, yes, they immigrated from Haiti, but all of them work in healthcare. And the dreams of my family was that I would be a doctor or working in some level of healthcare. And so to appease them, I went for I love science, and I was like, how do I mirror health and science? And so I decided to go for my health science degree, and that literally helped me in working in healthcare IT. So what it did for me was the company I worked for. I was an assistant manager at the time, and then I wanted to be in the C suite. I had visions of getting to the C suite. And what ended up happening was, I spent 2 years. This was a fast track MBA program that I
Mm,
attended. The company was going to pay for it. So I leveraged the company paying for my education. I went for the degree. When I got it, 3 months later, I got a promotion to be the manager for the company, for their support, and then for their product release line.
mm,
And so it helped. It helped me. The degree did help me in getting higher paid management jobs.
mm,
As people saw it on my resume, they're like, "Oh, this guy has a health background. He understands about health systems and how health systems work." It became a valuable asset. Now, in the last couple of jobs I've had, it wasn't really that valuable because I wasn't in the m- my last role in Striker. Yes, it was, but it did help me go from being a what I would call one of the workers doing the day to day to being a manager slash manager of multiple teams.
mm,
It did help. It did help me in that aspect of my career.
mm. Okay,
Mhm.
interesting. And it's so interesting that I asked that because I'm also like on my MBA journey right now. So
Mhm.
definitely wanted to get your thoughts on what the ROI on that was for you.
Mhm.
So for everyone on the call, we're coming towards the final ends of it. It's been amazing so far. Um, I mean, Jonathan has been sharing like a lot of his journey in tech, but the best part of it is yet to come because we're going to be talking about AI, robotics, and the city of Atlanta. So
Mhm.
definitely you want to stay locked in. And if you have any questions about his experience, you're navigating your tech journey. You're kind of like, trying to figure out certain things. I'm sure his wealth of experience will definitely come in handy. But tell me about, your project. Tell me
Hmm.
about this exciting thing, or tell the audience, because you've told me,
Yes,
and I
yes.
found it
Hmm.
very fascinating about how you're helping, in workforce development, in bringing, new skills to the community. What inspired that, and how is that journey going?
So I'll talk about what inspired that. I always had the passion to always give back because I saw what it did for my career, and I always felt if I helped other people see tech as something that can help them. And also, when I traveled, I always envisioned, hey, if I call a couple of my friends and say, hey, let's go to Germany, I have friends making money who can go to Germany with me. So that was the whole idea of what sparked me giving back. So I am the president and executive director, of Technologists of Color. Besides being a technologist by trade, I also run a nonprofit. I joined the nonprofit back in 2012. It was started by Marcellus Haynes, great friend of mine. I consider him family. We're like brothers. And the passion came from, I would say, the drive for me was seeing people who attended the our meetings, and then over time seeing them have success in their career. And I never asked for someone to say, John, thank you, you're the inspiration. That doesn't drive me. What
Mm,
drives me is seeing people who I've given advice to, or who one day, they're working at Walmart, the next day they're senior manager at Amazon. Like that right there
mm,
is like amazing to me. And you know, what I tell folks is I feel like I'm the vessel to help spearhead that passion. In terms of the projects that I'm working on, so one of the projects I'm working on is the Georgia AIM project. And for those who want to know more about the Georgia AIM project, is Georgia AIM, AIM.org. And it's a project inspired by Joe Biden and the build better, build back better initiative. There was money given to Georgia Tech, and I am part of Project 3. And the goal of our project is a mobile studio, as well as bringing knowledge and awareness of AI and manufacturing to women, minorities, people of color, all over the state of Georgia, especially in the
mm,
rural areas. And I've had the experience the last couple of weeks. I've been on the road the last couple of weeks, showcasing. We have a robot dog, nicknamed. We call it Nova. I actually named it Nova, and just sharing with the community about robotics, about AI, about VR, showcasing different technologies. What I see, especially in the state of Georgia, is I feel like we are a tech incubator, and
mm,
that technology, whether people want it or not, is going to be part of your life, regardless if you want
mm,
it or not. And
mm,
so, what brings me joy is as I go on the road and visit rural areas who are not exposed to AI or robotics, and then
mm,
showcase something very simple to them where they're like, oh, this is what this means. I get it now. Or something like, of course, there's a fear. There's always a fear of AI is going to take jobs away. AI is going to do this. And I always tell people this is that you shouldn't, what's going to take away the jobs is not AI. It's the person at the company who understands how AI works who's going to take away your job. So why not be the person at your company who knows how AI works,
mm,
and be a resource to your company instead of being someone who they feel that they can replace with the person that knows AI. And so
mm,
I got involved in AI back in 2017. That's when I started my journey. So before ChatGPT was even a thing, I had the opportunity of seeing it, learning about what it could do, and now to see what I saw back in 2017 to what we're doing now with it has been
mm,
remarkable, and it's been very fast. Okay, it's been
mm,
very fast, and every single day there's something new that you find. One of the things that I tell people is that even with robotics is a passion of mine. I've always been interested in robots, and being able to play with them and see how they work. And then as we take our robot dog around the the state of Georgia, one of the
mm,
things that I love is when people say, "Well, what else can it do besides walking? Sitting up on its legs?" And then me having these organic conversations with people and giving them
mm,
ideas. Well, listen, imagine if you program this thing to talk, or program it to lock doors and unlock doors, um, remotely. These are some of the use cases that you can use for these
mm,
things. So my goal with this project is to educate. The goal is to share enough information with someone where the curiosity of what they
mm,
see drives them to want to learn it. And so I know I'm not going to get every single person I interact with, but if in a sea of 100 people, if
mm,
10 of them are inspired to dive deeper into a tech career, that brings joy to my heart,
mm,
right? And so that's the Georgia AIM project. We're part of Project 3, and that's a combination of the Russell Center, Kit Labs, Technologies of Color, and UGA. We have the mobile studio, which is going to be a trailer with beautiful tech, but we're also going to different cities and sharing and talking about AI, and addressing the concerns, because there are concerns, addressing the concerns, but also educating people who look at Atlanta as heaven, because I can tell you in the rural areas, when they hear you're from Atlanta, they're like, "Oh, that's where all the smart people are." No, you can be smart right where you're at in
mm,
your little community. And so,
mm,
showing people that, hey, you can learn this stuff and you can actually be a resource in your community and build your community. So that's
mm,
so that's some of the passion that we're doing. And for my nonprofit, besides working on that project, we are a workforce development organization. So we help people get into tech. So one of the things that we teach is, besides teaching you how to code and how to do different things, we focus on how you network. How do you build that network? How do you build that community around you
mm,
that you can lean on to help you navigate your career? And so
mm,
those are the things that we teach. Um, at Technologies of Color. You can check us out at techsofcolor.org, TECHSOF color.org for more information. But those are my things that I enjoy doing them. They bring me joy every morning when I wake up, when I get an email from somebody that tells me, John, thank you for that piece of advice, or thank you, I got the job, or thank you,
mm,
the advice you gave me, helped me land this role. So those are the beautiful things that I thoroughly enjoy.
mm. Absolutely. And that resonates with me so much. Like,
Mm.
I don't think like there's a dollar amount or something else. It's just that gratification. Like you can't put a number on it. And I think that it's so funny that you could always relate it back to your own story and back to your own journey. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a sense of realization that you didn't do this by yourself. Like there were
Right.
people who played a role in that. So you being able to pay it forward actually really means something. So I know maybe not a lot of people get that, but when you were saying that, I felt it in my soul.
Mm-hmm.
So Mamo has a question. He's saying, this is great. I studied chemistry and later transitioned into IT, that's financial technology industry, and I'm working as an associate product manager. Given my educational background, I'm interested into moving in moving into PM roles in healthcare or biotech companies, I'd imagine. So, what skills or certifications would you recommend for someone in my positions? And do you have any insights on how to make this shift successfully?
Okay, so years ago, I was a fan of certifications. I have not been a fan as of late, even though I have quite a few, because people can test for certifications. You have to know how to do the work. Now, in your case, Mahmoud, being that you want to get PM roles, now is it program or product management roles? Because if it's product management, I would definitely say get your Scrum certification because there is a merger of Agile into product management. That's that's been happening. Get your Scrum certification. Get um, your product your PM certification. You can get it from PMI. That's one of the resources there. The other thing, though, that a lot of people don't do that I think is beneficial is learning some of the tools like Jira, Confluence, Trello. Those tools are things to get your hands on, but also doing a small project. I can't tell you how creating a small project and putting it on GitHub and then sharing here's the project that I put together. And the thing is, it could be a passion project, like something you're passionate about. What steps would you do to create the requirements for this particular project? um you know Put in what teams are responsible for the components of the project, and just write all that information out and put it on a GitHub. Use some of the AI um, image tools to create some images for you of said fictitious product and put it on your GitHub. Um, I can tell you, I've seen managers hire people who may not have the strongest skills, but because they built a project and it's something visually that they could see, that helped them get the job over someone who was experienced, who was overly experienced, who might end up leaving. So again, in your case, get your Scrum certification because Agile is the bread and butter of what a lot of these companies use. And if you have that, that gives you a leg up. Getting your product management certification, and then creating a small project. One other thing I would say, because the cloud is big, is becoming a big thing, and companies are moving there. You don't need to get the highest level cloud certification, but get your AWS cloud practitioner certification. That basically gives you the bare bones of what the cloud is and what tools are available. Just having that knowledge, like you don't need to go get developer associate, developer professional. You can get this low end thing that makes you a more attractive candidate, because when a company looks at your resume, now you have a project and they see, oh, this person knows something about the cloud. I don't need to start from square one. That just makes you a lot more attractive. That would be the advice I would give you.
It's so interesting that you said that because the Google certification that I took is why I'm in my current role today.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, in fact, you just gave me a new video idea. So, I do agree with you completely. I don't think that certifications are the be all end all that they used to
Mm-hmm.
be. But, and I think that it's a good curve that we are in, right? Because at some point it's like, oh, just get this certification and then it's game over. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's that. But when you add it to the skill sets that you have, I think it adds color to it, right? The
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're able to speak to it, because if you're a product manager who even has a basic understanding of the cloud, you understand like containerization, you understand like load balance, and you understand
Mm-hmm.
like all these concepts, you are going to be way better. Like you don't even
Mm-hmm.
need to know how it works, just the base understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be way farther along the line than someone who doesn't know. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
simple. Because even going through the certification, I realized that one of the things that I learned. So I got into tech basically by building my own tech company, doing e-commerce, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how I built the web, I didn't even build it. I worked with other people who helped me build it, but I know how to kind of like modify and do stuff like that. So I use a system called OpenCart, right? So I understood like this was just one piece of software that was coupled together that did multiple things. So you had like the banner module and you had this module and you had all those different things that were coupled together to make one thing. So even going through it and understanding like this idea of microservices, it was so fascinating to me. Why? Because seeing how that technology that I knew so well was built, I could really relate that understanding
Mm-hmm.
to that. So I think that's the role that that plays.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm happy you brought that point out because what I have been seeing lately are a lot of people post on LinkedIn that they got a certification, and that might help you get the interview. But the thing is, if you don't have any tangible work to back up that certification, companies look at you as someone who just knows how to take a test and not able to do the work. Because, like the example in your case, you built you built something. You were part of building something, so you can leverage that experience of I built this e-commerce platform with some people. That goes a long way to a company saying, "Oh, okay. Not only does he have the certification, but he built something." And so I'm not against them because listen, I'm still going for more. I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping. But when you go for them, the advice I give people is when you go for them, make sure that you not only know the information to pass the exam, but that you can do some of the things that fall under that certification. Like it bothers me when I speak to someone who says, "Oh, John, I got my Amazon Cloud Professional," and then I asked them, "Well, what's EC2?" I don't know. What? You got the professional certification and you don't remember what EC2 is? Wow, that's kind of scary.
That's something.
Yeah,
The
that's kind of scary because you got the professional. You don't have you got the professional
base one.
certification. Yeah, so I'm like, that's interesting that you don't know what EC2 is. So, it's things like that that I see a lot of people. And also another thing is there's a difference between certification and certificate.
Mm,
Okay.
yep.
That's a conversation that I know ruffles some feathers, but we have to address it. There's a difference between a certificate and a certification.
Mm,
Certification, you're going through examples. A certificate, anybody can create a certificate program.
that's
Like I
true.
see so many AI certificate programs, and then you go do them, and it's like 20 minutes. 20 minutes, we give you a certificate. You are now AI, AI prompt expert. Really? Are you an AI prompt expert? Let me test that theory. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And that's why like industry and I think a good way to even solve that problem is like, well, at least my litmus test to even figure like, is this worth an investment? So why am I getting an MBA? Because
Mm-hmm.
when I go on 6 out of every 10 product manager jobs, for some reason they want me to have an MBA. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go get this MBA so we can have this conversation. So I think it's that like if you're interested in a certain role, by the time you start to look at the job requirements, like SQL is big in product for some reason
Yep.
too. So
Mm-hmm.
I think once you start to look at it, you recognize those patterns and then you can start to kind of like navigate in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So Jason has a question and says, what's your number one tip for building a network? I know that you had mentioned that in your MailChimp role, it was your network that came true for you. So
Mm-hmm.
what's your number one tip for doing that?
My number one tip for building your network is it's tied to a goal. So whenever I go to it, so I started off as an introvert who is now an extrovert. Okay. And I was a very shy introvert, but over time I became an extrovert. One of my number one tip is set a goal to speak to three people at any event you go to. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay. You go to a meetup, right? You go to a meetup. Let's say you want to know more about, let's say, software engineering, and you attend this software engineering meetup. Well, before you go there, you want to set in your mind, I need to speak to three people.
Mm,
And it doesn't have to be a long conversation. You just need some starter questions. And my starter questions is, how I introduce myself is I walk up to somebody, hey, my name is John. Um, Pleasure meeting you here. What's your name? And when they tell me their name, I say, great, pleasure meeting you. What do you do? And that starts a conversation, right? And now, they're talking about themselves. Uh, Another tip is let people talk. Let people talk and then interject when you need to interject. So I have what's called, when I'm networking, I have a 80-20 rule. I listen 80% of the time. I provide input 20% of the time. That's just a rule of
mm,
mine sometimes, right? Now, when I get to
mm,
know you better, then the percentages change. But when I initially am in a space where I'm not comfortable in, and I resort back to the introvert side of John, I listen more than I speak, right? And then provide eye contact,
mm,
nod. Sometimes, if they say something that's interesting and it's something that relates to you, share your experience with them. And then another thing I do when it comes to networking is if it's a meaningful connection, I like to take a picture.
mm.
I like to take a picture with that
Ah,
person. And then what I do, especially if it's a person who I meet at an event that has access to jobs, I like taking a picture with them because um, how I leverage that picture is I will wait a week and I will say, hey, it was a pleasure meeting you. I find them on LinkedIn and I say, hey, it was a pleasure meeting you at whatever event I met them at. Um, you talked about you worked at this company. And if it's a company that I'm interested in, I'll ask them, hey, I found a role that I'm interested in. Just in case you forgot me, here's the picture we took together. And then that picture is the reinforcement. Because even if the person is reading the email, they're like, who's this person? And then they're like, oh, oh, yeah, I remember that person. We took a picture. That taking of the picture always for me clicks with people. Like I have an album of people who I met over the years who I took pictures with, who there are times when I'm with them and I show them the picture. I was like, do you remember the picture we took together? What picture? And I showed them like, oh yeah, we were at such and such place when we took
yep.
this picture. So that's how I became an extrovert. And as I got more comfortable with it, of course, I expanded the question. So I start off with, you know, hey, my name is John. I'm in tech sales. What's your name? You respond, what do you do? And then from there, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. So that's my tip for the nervous folks. Start off with just those simple questions, and then over time it'll get easier and easier and easier to network.
Yeah, it feels like it's more than one person who's getting value from that. It says, I love TT says, I love the conversation. And it's funny you're talking about being an introvert because I'm
Mhm.
looking to break away from that. Love all your advice.
Thank you. And listen, TT, it's a process. Like it took me some years. So just to share something funny, I had a heavy stutter. So when I would talk, I would stutter and I would be afraid to talk to people. So what I started doing was I started reading more and I started going to places that made me feel uncomfortable, right? So I would go play games with strangers, people who I don't know at these bars and stuff. And over time, the stutter became less and less and less. And then I started getting more comfortable being around people. And it's not for every each person has their pathway of overcoming being an introvert, but I think for me it was putting myself in uncomfortable situations. And then I was someone who never wanted to do public speaking, but then being kind of being forced to speak in front of people allowed me to get over that fear. Because I remember my dad. You remember I talked about going to church and being in church. I remember my dad one time. He was talking to the youth, and then he said, "I want my son John to talk to you." I'm like, oh, "Me? You know?" Like on the spot, in front of like 40 people, and he wanted me to talk, and I was just like, But I went up there, and I started off nervous, but then after a while, it was just like flowing. And
Mm.
then I got comfortable with it, and I told them, "Don't ever do that again." But I share all that to say, start small, listen 80% of the time, talk 20, and then once you get comfortable with somebody, of course, the the percentages change. But that's
Mm.
something, and maintain eye contact. Nothing hurts you more when someone's talking to you and then you're looking away and you're not paying attention, because then the person feels that you don't value what they say. But give
Mm.
them eye contact, smile, listen, and then when there's something they say that resonates with you, input input something in there to
Mm.
keep the conversation going. And sometimes you'll find yourself, you walk up to somebody, you talk to them, and then they become your best friend over
Yep.
time. So yeah.
Yep. Language has a way of bringing us all to, or communication has a way of bringing us together.
Hmm.
So I know we're over time, but we're going to take this last question from Mamo, and
Okay.
then you're going to have like your last comment, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So Mamo is saying, "Thank you. Last question. Since I'm targeting roles in healthcare or biotech, would you recommend working on a project related to healthcare to strengthen my profile, or does that make much of a difference?"
I would say yes. Like if the goal is to get into healthcare, um, I would definitely say focus on a healthcare topic. And here's the beautiful thing: we have ChatGPT now. We have Meta AI. Leverage the AI tool to give you a problem statement. Ask ChatGPT, what is a healthcare problem that is painstaking in the United States, or give me the top 10 health problems that are hurting the US. And then based on that, don't use ChatGPT to write up all your material. I am not for that. But leverage ChatGPT or Meta or any of the other tools to help you gather the research that you can now put together to create your project. Okay. So I'm a firm believer in using the tools to make you better. What I don't believe in is just having the tools write stuff for you and then you just hit send, because there's a human element in the process that I feel needs to be there. Like for me, I use these tools to give me my template, and then I work my template to make it sound like me, because I don't I don't ever want, when you interact with me, for me to give you something that doesn't sound like me. I want, when I send you something, it's for me. So leverage the tools to speed up the process in doing your research, but you can leverage it to give you a problem statement, and then from the problem statements have it pull the research for you to create your project and put it on GitHub, and then leverage that project when you apply to jobs in the notes section. Add, I have this project that I did based on this subject. Here's the link to check it out. Um,
Mm,
I guarantee you there are a lot of other people that are not doing that, right? There are a lot of people who don't share projects. Projects are projects validate what your resume says. So
mm.
I always tell people, you can write, I can help you write the fanciest resume that any company will sit there and interview you on the spot. The goal though is to get the job.
Yep.
So, leverage creating a project and sharing your project as reinforcement for what you say on your resume. That sets you apart.
and and where that is so powerful, I spoke to a gentleman almost on like a same medium, not on the working in tech, but a different thing I was hosting back in the day, and he said something very similar to that. So he's
Mm-hmm.
you know, a data analyst, and why he got his job that he wasn't at that moment was that he was looking to buy a car, and he had a budget, he had a type of car he was looking for, scraped like 3 websites, found all the cars, impute a bunch of like data points, whether it was like under a certain mileage, under a certain price point, certain brands, and was able to find with a high level of precision certain cars, and narrowed it down using that scientific method. I think what that shows, to just to back up the point you're talking about, that human element of creativity is, because he was talking about like building just another like Twitter clone versus building your own project and
Mm-hmm.
adding your own element to it. There's something you can speak to in that comes out different. First of all, you don't know Twitter's origin story. Even if you read it somewhere, you don't know what inspired it. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something that comes out when you talk about you looking for a car, because those were your own parameters. That was your vision. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody else did it, maybe they'll be looking for Mercedes cars, whereas you might be looking for Toyotas. So that aspect of you is what comes out when you add that element. So the project is the same. Like a million people can build that, but what you bring to it that's different. And I think what it shows more is like when you have a problem, how do you approach solving it? I think
Mm-hmm.
that comes out more than anything else. And that's what ultimately I think will win you those opportunities.
Exactly.
So Mamo says thank you. I'm sure like everybody else is also saying thank you because this has been such an amazing session. We usually give our guests, one final, minute to take however long you like to shout out whether you got a new movie coming out, books, a concert. So
So
yeah.
I'm going to share two books that helped me that I like. Actually, right now, I'm actually re listening right now on one of the books. First book is The 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene. It's one of my favorite books. The next one is The Secret, right? The Secret. It's a book written in 2006. And uh, those two books have helped me. Well, that and also the 4 hour work week is another book that has definitely helped me in my career. So in terms of books, those are three books I would say leveraged. In terms of what I'm working on right now, we have Georgia AIM Week. Georgia AIM Week is happening September 30th through October 4th. So if you follow georgiaaim.org, you'll see I'll be posting some things on that pretty soon. You'll see it on my LinkedIn. You can just follow me on LinkedIn. Just look up Jonathan Exume. You'll find me. But that is one thing, and then also for anyone who's in the data space, you're a data analyst, data scientist, data engineer. We have a event happening with BlackRock. If you're looking for work, feel free to go to our Technologists of Color LinkedIn page. There's a link to register, submit your resume, and your resume is what's going to get you in access to the invite to the actual event. So if you just register for the event, it doesn't guarantee your entry. You have to submit your resume in order to be granted access to this event. It's going to be at BlackRock's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. We're well connected with them. They've been a great partner of ours. They are looking to build out their pipelines, and they're going to be talking about some data and some of the tech. So this is an inside exclusive look into how BlackRock, which is the, if not the largest asset management company in the world, that happens next week, September 26th. Just go to our website, technologiesofcolor.org. You can go to my LinkedIn page, or you can go to our Technologists of Color LinkedIn page to get more information on that event.
Amazing. I also wanted to drop them in the chat, but I guess I can add them in later. But
Mm-hmm.
thanks so much, John. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for sharing all of this amazing knowledge on the stream today.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And if you want me to come back, I want to come back. We can talk some more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great time. And thanks everyone for joining. This is the stream for tonight. We look forward to having you. We have another 2 streams scheduled this week, so it's going to be heavy on the knowledge. Look forward to seeing everyone.